In the unfolding scroll of sacred history, few names shine with the quiet, radiant light of Isaac, son of Abraham, born not of might but of promise. His tale is not one of conquest, but of covenant. He was not the founder of cities, nor the slayer of kings, yet his very existence testified to the faithfulness of the Most High. Where other prophets stood in fire and storm, Isaac stood in the hush of divine fulfillment, the child of a barren woman and 100-year-old man, whose birth itself was a miracle beyond human expectation. Isaac was not a man of many words, yet his life spoke volumes. He was the son of laughter, the vessel of hope, the bridge between promise and legacy. He lived not in the wilds like Ishmael, nor wrestled angels like Jacob, but walked a path of quiet obedience and steadfast devotion. Through him, the covenant passed from Abraham's hands to generations uncountable, his lineage becoming a nation, his faith becoming a light. His story, scattered across sacred texts, carries the fragrance of divine intimacy. It is a tale of altars and wells, of fathers and sons, of blessings given and birthrights sought. In Isaac, heaven's faithfulness met earth's longing. He is a prophet not of thunder, but of stillness, not of war, but of witness. And though the world remembers louder names, the heavens remember Isaac, for through him the promise endured. Thus begins the sacred account of Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah, the father of Jacob and Esau, and the prophet of unwavering grace. Birth and early life. The birth of Isaac was not ordinary, nor could it be, for he was born from the womb of impossibility. In the plains of Canaan, under the stars promised to his father Abraham, Isaac was conceived when all hope by earthly reason had perished. Abraham was 100 years old, and Sarah 90, her womb long barren, her laughter once bitter at the thought of childbirth. Yet the Lord spoke, and what was barren brought forth life. The messengers from heaven came to Abraham's tent beneath the oaks of Mamre. They declared that within a year Sarah would bear a son. She laughed in silence, hidden behind the curtain, for she had grown weary with waiting. But the Lord asked, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" And so, at the appointed time, the promise took flesh. They named the child Isaac, meaning laughter, for the sorrow of waiting had turned to joy. From his earliest breath, Isaac was set apart, not by title, but by destiny. He was not born into a palace, but into tents pitched in wandering obedience. His cradle was beneath the open heavens, his lullabies the murmurs of faith and prophecy. He drank from the waters of covenant and was raised on the stories of a God who calls from afar and walks with the faithful dot as a child. Isaac walked beside his father Abraham, learning not the ways of the world, but the ways of the Lord. He heard tales of yore, of the voice that called from beyond the stars, of altars built and promises made. His heart was shaped not by nations, but by the weight of destiny. For he was the heir not merely of lands, but of blessing. Not merely of tents, but of testimony. But the greatest test came not when Isaac was old, but when he was still a youth. Abraham, commanded by the Lord, took his son to Mount Moriah. Isaac, carrying the wood of the offering, asked, "Father, where is the lamb?" And Abraham replied, "The Lord will provide." Thereupon, the mount, Isaac lay bound, the knife raised, and heaven held its breath. Yet the angel called out, and a ram was provided in the thicket. Isaac's life was spared not by chance, but by providence. From that moment, his life was doubly sacred, once given by miracle, once saved by mercy. Growing into manhood, Isaac remained quiet in spirit, steadfast in purpose. He did not hunger for conquest, but for communion. He was not drawn to noise, but to the still places where heaven speaks. In time, Abraham sent his servant to the land of Nar to find a wife for his son, and Rebekah came, chosen by God, drawn by grace, and clothed in beauty. Isaac took her into his mother's tent and was comforted, for Sarah had passed, and her spirit of faith rested now in the son she had borne. Thus, the early life of Isaac unfolded her, life not loud with deeds, but deep with meaning. His every step was watched by the God of his father. His every breath was a continuation of covenant. He was the child of laughter, the son of sacrifice, the prophet of peace. And in his quiet strength, the foundation was laid for a nation yet unborn, and a promise yet unfolding. The world at that time, in the days of Isaac, the earth was a land of wandering nations, rising kings, and ancient altars. The sands of Canaan bore the footprints of traders, shepherds, and warriors. City-states flourished to the north in Aram, and to the south in Egypt, each ruled by monarchs who spoke from thrones but did not heed the voice of heaven. Idolatry spread like the dust on the whinstone gods set in temples. Sun gods honored with incense, and carved idols worshipped by tribes who had long forgotten the Creator who fashioned them from clay. That the mighty land of Egypt stood proud in the west, where pharaohs reigned as gods among men, their chariots swift and their granaries full. To the east, Mesopotamia thrived along the Tigris and Euphrates, its ziggurats rising to touch the sky, but their prayers were not lifted to the Most High. The sons of men were many, but the sons of faith were few. Among the Canaanite peoples, the moral ground had crumbled. Cities like Gerar and Hebron held men of power, but their hearts were far from righteousness. Kings took what pleased them, and altars bled with sacrifices to lifeless idols. Hospitality remained a noble virtue, yet the fear of God had departed from many. Abraham's household stood as a solitary flame in a valley of darkness, a remnant that remembered the name of the Lord, while others bowed to carved images and called them divine. Nations rose and fell on the backs of war, but the legacy of Noah's sons continued to shape the peoples. The children of Shem walked the path of promise, while those of Ham and Japheth spread across distant lands, building towers and empires, yet forgetting their beginning. Prophets were few, and visions rare. The world at the time of Isaac was a crossroads between idolatry and monotheism, between cities of man and the tents of God's chosen. It was an age when the earth was rich with blessing, but the hearts of men were poor in spirit. Amid this backdrop of spiritual famine, Isaac was raised not to conquer nations, but to preserve a promise to carry the covenant, to walk in the footsteps of his father Abraham, and to keep the flame of faith alive in a world losing its light. He did not raise armies, nor build cities, but he dwelt in tents, dug wells, and called upon the name of the Lord. And in his quiet obedience, the Lord made his presence known. For though the world forgot the Creator had not forgotten the world. Through Isaac, the line of blessing endured, patient, pure, and preserved. Signs of prophethood, the signs of Isaac's divine appointment, did not burst forth with thunder nor blaze with fire, but shone with quiet light in the simplicity of his life. He was not a man of many words, but his words were seasoned with grace. From his youth, there was a gentleness upon him, a reverent fear of the Lord, and a deep submission that marked him as set apart. Where others grasped for dominion, Isaac walked with restraint. Where men schemed, Isaac trusted. The first and most sacred sign of his calling was his miraculous birth. Born to Sarah in her old age, when all hope of childbirth had withered, Isaac entered the world, not by nature but by promise. His life was a living testimony to the power of the Word of God, a child born not of strength but of faith. His very name, Isaac, meaning he laughs, was a remembrance of God's mercy and might, and his birth echoed like prophecy in every cradle thereafter. Another sign of his calling was his willing submission upon the altar. When his father Abraham, under divine command, laid him upon the wood and raised the blade, Isaac did not flee, did not resist. Though still a youth, he yielded without struggle. It was not weakness, but surrender to the will of the Most High. That moment, though halted by an angel's voice, revealed the purity of Isaac's faith and the mark of a soul formed for sacred duty. In his manhood, he neither sought power nor boasted of lineage, but he feared the Lord in silence and was patient under trial. When the Philistines stopped his wells, he reopened them without quarrel. When he was displaced, he moved on in peace. And wherever he went, the Lord was with him. His life became a stream of blessing, even to those who wronged him. This quiet favor, this unseen hand of providence, was a sign that Isaac was not like other men. He was a vessel chosen to carry the covenant. He walked in the paths of righteousness laid by Abraham, built altars, and called upon the name of the Lord in a time when others bowed to Baal and Asherah. He taught by living, not by commanding. He preserved truth, not with sword or scroll, but by dwelling in obedience. And wherever his tent was pitched, peace followed. Though no tablets were given him, and no plagues accompanied his steps, the signs of his prophethood were clear to those who watched with spiritual eyes. Isaac was the bridge between the faith of Abraham and the wrestling of Jacob. He was the son of promise, the heir of covenant, and the prophet of peace. Through stillness, through sacrifice, and through steadfastness, the signs of the Lord's choosing rested upon him like dew on morning, grass gentle, pure, and undeniable. The call to prophethood, the call upon Isaac, did not descend like fire from heaven, nor did it come with visions of angels in the wilderness. Rather, it was a sacred inheritance, a quiet anointing passed from father to son beneath the open skies of Canaan. Abraham had heard the voice of the Almighty. Isaac walked in its echo, yet the echo was not dim, it was alive, warm with covenant and heavy with divine trust. From the moment his mother weaned him and set him in the arms of promise, Isaac was chosen. He was not called to establish a new law, but to preserve the one already given. He did not build nations by sword, but by faith and faithfulness. His prophetic call was to sustain, to bear the covenant, not as a founder, but as a keeper. In Isaac, the promise lived on, breathing, unbroken. When Abraham grew old and full of years, he blessed Isaac with the weight of the everlasting covenant. Through your seed, he was told, shall all the nations be blessed. Isaac received not only the blessing, but the burden. He inherited the land, the promise, and the sacred duty of guiding his household in righteousness and the fear of the Lord. His life became a scroll upon which the covenant was written anew. Isaac's prophetic role unfolded in quiet places. He did not cry out in the streets or confront kings with thunder. He ministered to his household. He taught his servants, raised his sons, and dwelled as a sojourner in a land not yet his. Yet every step he took, he bore the ark of the promise. In his hands, faith did not dwindle, it deepened. In his tents, the name of the Lord was remembered in the famine. Isaac sought not Egypt, but listened to the voice of the Lord. Do not go down, the Lord told him. Sojourn in this land, and I will bless you. Isaac obeyed without question. He planted in a land of dust and reaped 100-fold, for the Lord was with him. His obedience in uncertainty became a proclamation. His faith in silence thundered louder than sermons. In the midst of hardship, his prosperity became a sign to all that God had not forsaken his chosen. The Philistines, jealous of his success, strove with him, stopped his wells, and sought to drive him away. But Isaac did not fight. He moved from place to place, digging again the wells of Abraham, calling them by the names his father had given. It was an act of prophetic preservation, a restoring of what the enemy tried to bury. The water flowed once more, and with it the witness of divine favor. The call of prophethood upon Isaac was also marked by reconciliation. When Abimelech, king of the Philistines, came to him with fear in his heart, Isaac did not repay insult with anger. Instead, he prepared a feast, made peace, and swore an oath of friendship. His diplomacy was holy, his mercy prophetic, for he represented not just a man, but a covenant people. Through Isaac's peacemaking, the land itself bore witness that God was with him. Perhaps the most intimate moment of his calling was in the birth of his twin sons, Esau and Jacob. Here the mystery of divine election stirred again. Though he loved Esau the elder, it would be Jacob, the younger, who would carry the prophetic line. Isaac's role was not to resist the will of heaven, but to yield to it, even when it cut across his human affection. In blessing Jacob, though blind in body, he saw with the eyes of the Spirit. The covenant passed on unbroken. In all his days, Isaac did not raise a nation, nor part a sea, nor write a law. Yet his prophetic call was no less sacred. He was the bridge between beginning and becoming. In him, the promise did not perish. It endured. He kept the altar burning, the memory alive, the hope unshaken. Isaac's call was not loud, but lasting, not dramatic, but divine. He was the stillness between the storms, the faith between the fire, the seed between the branches. And in that stillness, the voice of God was heard. The message and teachings. Isaac's message was not thundered from mountaintops, but whispered from tent to tent, carried on the winds of peace, planted in the furrows of obedience, and watered by the dew of divine remembrance. Unlike prophets who shattered idols or challenged kings, Isaac's teachings were sown gently into the fabric of daily life. His mission was not to overturn, but to uphold, not to rewrite, but to reaffirm. At the heart of Isaac's message was covenant fidelity. He taught that the promises of God were not ornaments to be admired, but responsibilities to be lived. His life bore constant witness that divine blessing walks hand in hand with obedience. In every field he sowed, every well he dug, every prayer he whispered at dusk, Isaac taught that God's favor is not earned through noise but through faithfulness. He instructed his household to fear the Lord and walk uprightly, just as his father Abraham had taught him. The path of righteousness for Isaac was a well-worn trail, passed down from patriarch to patriarch. He guarded it fiercely, not with the sword, but with the heart. He kept alive the sacred traditions, the building of altars, the offering of sacrifices, the remembrance of God's name upon waking and sleeping. Isaac's teachings also upheld the principle of peace over strife. When the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled over water, he did not raise his voice or demand retribution. He simply moved and dug again. His message in that moment was louder than any commandment. Let not the pursuit of blessing be stained with bitterness. True strength lies in yielding to God, not in dominating men. Central to Isaac's message was the belief that blessing flows from faith, not force. When he sowed in the land during famine and reaped 100-fold, he did not claim cleverness or power. He pointed always to the Lord. His prosperity was not merely a personal reward, it was a sermon to his neighbors that obedience brings abundance, and trust brings provision. He also taught the sacredness of names and remembrance. He reopened the wells of Abraham and called them by their original names. It was not mere sentiment, it was theology. In every name restored, he declared that the past must not be forgotten, that what God has established, man must not erase. Memory, for Isaac, was a form of worship, on in matters of family and legacy. Isaac taught reverence. He honored his father's footsteps and longed to see his sons walk in the same way. He taught that lineage was not merely of blood, but of faith. And though his heart was torn between Esau and Jacob, he knew that the blessing must rest upon the one who followed the path of covenant obedience. Isaac's silence at times was also his message. When others might have cursed, he prayed. When others might have fought, he moved on. His restraint was not weakness, it was reverence. He modeled that the presence of God is best hosted in tents of peace and in hearts free of vengeance to those who served him. Isaac spoke of the one true God, not of many idols, but of the Lord who made heaven and earth. He passed down the stories of Eden, the flood, and the journey of Abraham. He taught that the Creator was not distant, but near, guiding, watching, blessing those who feared him in his own quiet way. Isaac proclaimed the gospel of faith long before tablets of stone, long before the prophets of fire. His teachings laid the stones of a path that would be walked by Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and beyond. A path not of conquest, but of covenant, not of dominion, but of devotion. Isaac's message was never shouted, but it was never silenced. It moved from tent to tent, from generation to generation, a living ember passed by hands that knew its worth. And in that ember, the light of God's faithfulness still burns. Challenges and opposition, though Isaac's life bore the quiet fragrance of peace, his days were not without struggle. The path of righteousness has never been a path without stones, and the man who bore the covenant of Abraham upon his shoulders was not spared the trials that test the faithful. His life was marked not by the roar of battle, but by the persistent friction of envy, contention, and deception. One of Isaac's earliest challenges came during famine, when he was compelled to journey to Gerar in the land of the Philistines. Like his father before him, he faced the uncertainty of foreign soil and the hostility of kings. Fearing for his life because of Rebekah's beauty, he told the men of Gerar that she was his sister. It was not a lie without cost, it was a wound upon truth. Yet even in this misstep, the Lord preserved him, revealing to King Abimelech the truth and protecting the prophet's household from dishonor. In Gerar, Isaac's prosperity became a source of tension. The Lord blessed him greatly, his flocks multiplied, his crops flourished, and his household expanded, until he became mightier than the Philistine lords who hosted him. But with blessing came the bitterness of envy. The Philistines, unable to rejoice in his success, stopped up the wells dug by Abraham and drove Isaac away. They could not stomach his peace, nor endure his growth. Isaac's response was not vengeance, but departure. He moved to the valley and dug again. Yet at every new well, contention followed. The herdsmen of Gerar disputed with his servants, claiming the water as their own. Isaac named the wells Ishaq and Sitnah, quarrel and hostility. These were not just names, they were testimonies of the opposition he faced for simply abiding in the Lord's favor. Still, Isaac did not fight. He moved once more and dug again. This time there was no strife, and he named the well Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." In his retreat, he gained peace. In his humility, he gained dominion. In yielding, he conquered. Another challenge arose in his own house, challenge not of strangers, but of sons. Isaac loved Esau, the firstborn, the skilled hunter, the man of the field, yet the covenant would pass through Jacob, the quiet dweller of tents, the one chosen by divine decree before birth. Rebekah knew this, and Jacob, guided by her hand, deceived his father in old age, disguising himself as Esau to receive the blessing. It was a moment of deep sorrow. Isaac, trembling in spirit, realized he had been tricked, yet he did not reverse his words. He accepted that the blessing had passed to Jacob and would not be withdrawn. His heart was pierced by the deception, but his faith endured the wound. In this, Isaac demonstrated submission not to human desire, but to the sovereign will of God even when it came wrapped in pain. His opposition, then, was both external and internal, from foreign kings and familiar kin, from the envious outside and the deceptive within. Yet in all these things, Isaac remained steadfast. He did not raise a sword, nor curse his foes. He walked with patience, carried his burdens with grace, and trusted that the Lord who promised would also provide. Isaac's greatest challenge may have been the test of silence, to endure misunderstanding without defense, to accept pain without retaliation, to walk forward while others plotted behind him. It was the challenge of the meek, the trial of the quiet righteous. But Isaac prevailed, not by wrath, but by worship, not by conquest, but by covenant. In the stillness of his trials, the echo of Isaac's faith rang loud, and through every conflict and betrayal, the flame of the promise passed unextinguished from Abraham to Isaac, and from Isaac to Jacob. The opposition came, but the covenant endured, and in that endurance, Isaac's quiet strength shines brightest. Legacy and impact. The legacy of Isaac did not thunder across the lands with war or conquest, yet it settled upon the earth like dew upon the morning grass, gentle, pure, enduring. His life was the bridge between promise and fulfillment, between the fiery obedience of Abraham and the unfolding destiny of Jacob. In Isaac, the covenant of God found a quiet sanctuary, a place of nurture and passing on. Isaac's impact cannot be measured in battles won or cities built, but in faith sustained, in blessing transmitted, and in generations shaped by righteousness. He was the child of the impossible promise, born to a man and woman whose bodies were long past hope. He was the son laid upon the altar, a living sign that faith walks where sight cannot follow. And he was the father who blessed the future, even as his own eyes dimmed with age. In him, the seed of Abraham took root and stretched toward the future. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Through Isaac shall thy seed be called." And so it was. From Isaac came Jacob, and from Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. His name is etched into the very identity of a people who would forever call themselves the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His life was not marked by multitudes, yet his influence spanned nations. He reopened the wells of Abraham, not merely restoring water, but preserving heritage, continuity, and covenant. He taught by example that peace is greater than pride, and that divine favor cannot be grasped by might, but must be received in humility. Though he was often overshadowed by his father's fiery obedience and his son's tumultuous journey, Isaac's stillness was his strength. He showed the world that faith does not always roar, that some prophets walk quietly yet carry the weight of eternity in their steps. His gentleness was not weakness, it was steadfastness. Children of Israel, Isaac became a pillar in the holy narrative. His name was invoked in prayers, his story told in tents and temples. When prophets warned of exile or promised restoration, they reminded the people of their identity as sons of Isaac, sons of the covenant, heirs of the blessing. In the Christian tradition, Isaac was seen as a foreshadowing of the Christ's, the beloved Son, offered up by the Father, carrying the wood of his own sacrifice. Though spared by divine mercy, his willingness and the faith of his Father became a prophetic symbol of salvation to come. His life prefigured greater things, and his quiet obedience whispered of the lamb that would one day be slain. In the Islamic tradition, Isaac Ishaq is honored as a noble prophet, a bearer of divine light, and a link in the unbroken chain of messengers who submitted to the will of the Almighty. His name is mentioned in the Quran with reverence, and his legacy is preserved as part of the sacred ancestry that carried divine guidance to mankind. Isaac's legacy is not one of noise, but of depth. He represents the faith that stays, the covenant that continues, the blessing that does not fade. His story teaches that even when life is quiet, purpose can be profound. His impact lies not in the dramatic, but in the durable. He did not seek to be remembered, but he could not be forgotten. And so Isaac, son of Abraham and father of Jacob, remains one of the central figures in the divine narrative. His life is a reminder that God's promises are not always fulfilled in thunder, but in trust, and that the weight of eternity can rest on the shoulders of a man who simply believes. Death and burial. The days of Isaac drew to a close with gentleness, as a flame that has warmed the house for many years, now dimming in peace. He had lived a long life, one of endurance, obedience, and unshakable covenant, having seen the birth of nations through his sons, having passed down the blessing of his father Abraham, and having walked in the presence of the Most High. Isaac reached the end of his days, not with fear, but with fullness. He had grown blind with age, and his body had grown weak, yet his spirit remained firm, tethered to the covenant that had marked him since the day he first felt his father's knife, and the voice of God spared him. He had learned that life was not measured in comfort, but in calling, and his was fulfilled as his strength waned. Isaac called to his sons, Jacob and Esau. Though division had once marked their youth, reconciliation came in the twilight. They stood beside the father who had once blessed and burdened them both with destiny. Now they listened, as Isaac gave his final counsel, not in many words, but in the silence of a life lived in faith. His hands, once laid upon them in prophetic blessing, now rested beside him in peace. Then, as the scriptures tell, Isaac gave up the ghost, and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. He was 180 years old when he breathed his last. His passing was neither sudden nor tragic. It was the gentle departure of a soul returning home, escorted by the prayers of the righteous and the memory of obedience. His sons, Esau and Jacob, laid aside past quarrels to fulfill the final duty of sons. Together they carried their father to his resting place with reverence and unity. They buried him in the cave of Machpelah, beside his wife Rebekah, and near his father Abraham and mother Saratha, tomb of the patriarchs, the cradle of covenant. There, beneath the soil of Hebron, the body of Isaac was laid to rest. The earth closed over the man whose life had bridged the great promise of Abraham and the 12 tribes of Jacob. Yet his memory was not buried with him. The field and the cave stood as markers not merely of death, but of divine faithfulness, for this was the land promised to his descendants. And in his death, as in his life, Isaac bore witness to that promise. His grave was not marked by monuments of gold or triumphal stone, but by the testimony of generations. To this day, the name of Isaac is spoken with reverence by the children of Israel, honored by the followers of Christ, and revered by those who follow the path of Ishmael. His burial sealed a life of stillness, yet stirred the hearts of the faithful for ages to come. Isaac died as he had lived in the shadow of divine presence, in the memory of obedience, and in the assurance that the God of Abraham would remain the God of his sons. Interfaith perspective. In the noble tradition of Islam, Isaac honored as a prophet of the Most High, the blessed son of Abraham and Sarah, and the brother of Ishmael. His birth, long awaited and divinely foretold, came as a miracle in the twilight years of his parents. The Quran recounts him as a righteous man, a bearer of knowledge and mercy, chosen among the elect. He was part of the lineage of those whom God favored, and his name is listed among the honored prophets alongside Jacob, Joseph, and others. While the Quran emphasizes the role of Ishmael in the near-sacrifice narrative, it gives Isaac his due reverence as a prophet whose descendants would carry the covenant. He is remembered not merely for his bloodline, but for his righteousness, patience, and devotion to divine command. Islam affirms his prophethood, his moral purity, and his standing as a torchbearer of truth in the household of Abraham. In Christianity, Isaac is the child of promise, the fulfillment of God's covenant with Abraham. His birth was a sign of divine intervention, for Sarah had been barren, and both she and Abraham were advanced in years. The New Testament recalls Isaac as a symbol of faith and divine fulfillment. In the Epistle to the Hebrews, it is written that by faith Sarah received strength to conceive Isaac, and by Isaac's line came Jacob, and from Jacob the tribes of Israel. Isaac's near sacrifice by Abraham is viewed by Christians as a foreshadowing of the crucifixion of Christ, the beloved Son offered upon the altar of obedience. The ram caught in the thicket, offered in Isaac's place, prefigures the Lamb of God, who taketh away the sin of the world. Though Isaac spoke little, His life testified to the patience of saints and the quiet obedience that walks hand in hand with faith. In him, the covenant continued, and through him, salvation history advanced. In the Hebrew tradition, Isaac Ishaq is one of the three patriarchs of Israel, the second link in the divine covenant that began with Abraham and was fulfilled through Jacob. His birth was heralded by messengers of God and received with laughter and awe. Isaac's life is a testament to divine promise and silent strength. Though less vocal than his father and son, his deeds spoke of obedience, endurance, and spiritual depth. That the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, is one of the most sacred narratives in Jewish memory. Isaac's willingness to be bound and Abraham's readiness to sacrifice stand as ultimate acts of faith. Jewish tradition sees in Isaac the quiet patriarch who dug wells, lived in the land of promise, and blessed his sons with words that shaped nations. He is a figure of continuity, not conquest, a pillar of covenant, not conflict. Through him, the line of Israel was preserved and the divine promise upheld. Prophet Isaac stands as a revered figure in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism alike. Across all three faiths, he is remembered as the miracle child, the bearer of covenant, and a man of unwavering faith. Though the traditions differ in detail, they unite in honoring his piety, his role in sacred history, and his enduring connection to the lineage of prophets and the divine plan. Isaac's name, meaning laughter, still echoes with the joy of promise fulfilled and the solemn weight of a legacy that shaped nations.